camera rolling.
Spooky World Doc, take.
Spooky World. It's hard to explain to somebody who didn't go there and see it.
Do you have any good Halloween memories of your days growing up?
I have tons. Do you remember Spooky World?
In Boston?
Oh, no, in the middle of nowhere in a farm that was terrifying and scary, and they had a haunted house, and I just loved it.
Nothing compares to Spooky World, and it was something that was so unique. Everybody knew it was a phenomenon.
The golden age of horror started in the United States in 1978 with the release of the original Halloween.
It's only open this one full month. October, let's go back to Spooky World. Tommy Savini's Spooky World.
Its credits include Dawn of the Dead, Creepshow, The Burning, and a whole slew of Friday the 13th movies. Mr. Tom Savini.
We came up with the concept of creating a mini Halloween theme park.
It took a visionary like David Bertolino to create a place like Spooky World.
The one-time farm has a 20-minute hayride with all kinds of unexpected sights.
So anything that would extend...
Director of Spooktacular the movie, Quinn Monahan. Producer of Spooktacular the movie, Danny Wolf. Actor and haunt historian, A.J. Dana. And your host for this presentation, Grandpa Munster in Rob Zombie's The Munsters, actor Daniel Roebuck.
Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Landry.
Anthony Landry.
Yeah! Woo!
I think we have more people on stage than in the audience.
Yes, we'd like to see a panel about people who went to Midsummer Scream. You're all in it. My first question is for you. Ladies and gentlemen, he's throwing something at his wife. Don't throw that at your wife. Danny Roebuck, I'm Danny Roebuck, and I'm so pleased and honored to be here with this illustrious group of people. One of us has been in hundreds of movies and hundreds of television shows.
That guy right there.
And the rest of us got comfortable chairs.
He's the star of the new Rob Zombie Munsters coming out very soon. Tell us when it's coming out.
But the truth is, I'm so pleased and honored to be part of this panel. Don't you guys want to move over to the middle? Because I feel like
close it in.
Talk like this. Oh, I understand. Thank you. I see. It was all explained to me. Hi, hello, nice to see you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not only this guy who's lucky enough to be the guy I am, I'm also a guy lucky enough to know each and every one of these people, and a guy who was lucky enough to go to Spooky World many times, not just once. Many times, and I loved it. So we're so pleased that you're here, and we're going to get right directly into the panel. And we're going to start with David Bertolino, my friend, and the fella who had the crazy idea. David, in a nutshell, I always say that when I'm running a panel. In a nutshell, that means keep it short. In a nutshell, tell us where you got this idea.
In a nutshell, I was trying to find a hayride that my wife and I could go visit.
In 1991.
In the fall, it was actually 1990. And we checked around, there was nothing available, everything was sold out. And then a friend of mine called out of the blue and said, hey, there's this crazy hayride going on in New Jersey called Haunted Hayrides. It has Vincent Price as its, press.
The narrator, yeah.
And so I said, let's go fly out, let's go check it out. I went to see it. It was pretty crude and rude, but I thought it had great potential. So I came back with the idea, I shared it with some friends, we were gonna pool some money together. Make a long story short, I find a dairy farm the following year, and I sign a lease to rent it. The dairy farm went out of business, they didn't pay their bills, whatever. And so the FDIC said, we're not going to give you the lease, but we'll make it that your mortgage payments, you'll own the farm. So I bought the farm in 1991 in May and called Tom Savini and said, you don't know me, but we have some mutual friends. And I really would like to do this haunt hayride trail with actors populating various stage sets along the trail. And he thought that was a great idea. He came out during the summer, he helped us build some of the sets, and we started in 91, October of 91, and I think my partner said we would break even if we can do 200 people a night. And we were open for 31 nights, and we were doing an average of 2,000 people a night. So we paid back our 15-year loan in 3 weeks. And Tom said, you know, you got to change the name of the spooky hayrides. We got to call it like Disneyland or Disney World. So he came up with the name Spooky World. And again, to his credit, if it wasn't for his creativity, we wouldn't have lasted the season. Tom had some great ideas that we did on the cheap, and I learned how to guerrilla market for like very little money, which as a result sent lots of people to our haunted attraction. And to this day, I still welcome phone calls. People have my phone number, they call and say, okay, how do we spend $5,000? How do we spend $10,000? And I give them advice. I've never charged anyone for the advice. I'm just happy to share that because I was so successful with my own thing. And I was just happy to help other haunters throughout the country.
And David, I'm gonna, if I could for a second, look, we're in a different world than we gotta put our 30-year ago cap on. Some of you don't know what that was like because 30 years ago you weren't here. Those of us who are old men, 30 years ago, was a whole nother world. Now we have AJ, he is our panel's expert, an expert on haunting Spooky World. Now remember AJ, back before Spooky World, let's just take the audience in a nutshell, AJ, to that time when it was JC's doing haunted houses. It was the local Rotary group. Can we talk about that for a second?
And also, would you talk about how you discovered that Spooky World existed, because I think that's going to be fascinating for people.
Quinn, I'm sorry, Quinn. I'm hosting the panel.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Quinn. Can I ask the question?
Sure.
All right. And then when you're done, AJ, tell us how you discovered Spooky World, and we think that would be interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you, AJ, for your fabulous comments. No,
that was wonderful.
So, Spooky World was born at a time when the corporate-sponsored haunted attractions we see now really wasn't a thing. And you look at events like Halloween Horror Nights at Universal and Not Scary Farm, obviously, which has been around since the 70s. Spooky World brought this perfect marriage of corporate sponsorships, intellectual properties, the top names in horror entertainment, and brought them to a small town in the middle of America, you know, in Massachusetts, this farm. And so you think about people like names you'll be hearing later on this panel, Tom Savini and Elvira, and all these big names that we think of as mainstays in the haunted attraction industry nowadays, essentially started out at Spooky World because you found the perfect intersection of horror entertainment, haunted attractions, and the traditional haunted house style, and brought them all together. As for how I discovered Spooky World, hate to break it to you, Danny, I'm not one of the old men, I don't have a 30-year cap. However, thanks to people like yourself and your fantastic documentary, Halloween, the Happy Haunting of America.
Right. Woo! And Chuck Williams, I gotta give him credit.
And Chuck Williams as well, and Dr. Shocker, who couldn't be here with us today, I know.
Yeah, he's a bit of a jerk.
Yeah.
Dr. Shocker, it's not a pleasant person.
So this documentary, Halloween, oh, Shocker, that was good, I like that, oh yeah. So Halloween, the Happy Haunting of America comes out in the 90s and documents essentially how the holiday is being celebrated all around the country. And one of the stops in this documentary is Spooky World. I'm a big fan of preservationism when it comes to haunted attractions and themed entertainment. I'm also one of the executive producers of a YouTube show called Defunctland. Maybe some of you have watched that.
Yeah. And you're an active haunter.
I'm an active haunter as well. So essentially anything that preserves the haunted attraction industry at a point in time is very special to me, and that's exactly what Danny did here with Halloween, the Happy Haunting of America, and that is how I discovered the lightning in a bottle that was Spooky World in the 90s.
So, I mean, and to have been there in the 90s, David, you started out, you had a hayride, and but then one day, and by the way, Tom Savini, we should mention, who's not with us today, he's alive, he's not with us today. Tom started out in the theater. People don't know this. I had friends in the community theater that I grew up in, and you know, when Tom, if you have that, that book that Tom did, Grand Illusion or whatever, and there's pictures of him as Ben Franklin. My friends were in those shows with him. Anyway, he was he knew how to do stage work, he knew how to direct the actors, and had a very big impact. Who was the first celebrity in it? At what point did you decide, I want to ask a celebrity to come?
Actually, in advance, when we were building it out, we had horror fans who were coming, and they weren't volunteers. We paid everybody. And so people were coming from all over in the New England area and spending their time, and, you know, we're working side by side on the trail, and they're suggesting, you know, reach out, get some horror celebrities. And there wasn't really shows like this back then at all. So we reached out to Kane Hodder, Butch Patrick, and of course Tom, and they were the signing celebrities in year one. Year two, it exploded. You know, Linda Blair, Robert Englund, Dan Roebuck.
Can you quickly tell them the story of how you found Linda Blair? Everybody knows who Linda Blair is.
You're doing it again.
Linda Blair, I wrote letters to.
Sorry.
Never gotten any responses. And so somebody said, hey, she lives in Westport, Connecticut. Her mom lives in Westport, Connecticut. So I drove to Westport from Boston, and I found an excise tax bill.
You went to the city hall.
The city hall.
Where you started stalking her. Go.
I did start stalking her. And I found she had an unpaid excise tax on her car, which gave me the public record to find out where she lived, which allowed me to write stalking. Yes. And so her mom convinced Linda to go visit Spooky World. If she doesn't like it, come home the first night and that will be fine. Linda stayed the whole month, every night. When she arrived, I had a skid of cans of pea soup, and she would sign them, "You make my head spin, Linda Blair."
That's awesome.
Sold every one of them for $20.
They're worth 10 grand today if you can find one.
And so that was our first, major celebrity that had huge lines.
And this is indicative, folks, on the guy we all know, David, and why, when we get to it, why Quinn and Danny, Anthony, why we had to make this documentary, because there is no one like this guy, because no one had these ideas. You really are, I think, the premier entrepreneur in the world.
He's the first. He started the entire haunting industry outside of the corporate sponsors. Let's give it up for Scary Farm and Universal Horror Nights.
Freestanding haunted attractions.
Dedicated 1 month a year, October every year, totally dedicated to Halloween and horror. And then it came back again every year. That is now a business model for thousands of haunts around the country. He was the first.
Yeah, this fair is largely responsible for bringing haunted attractions to the scale they're at today.
Are there any haunted house or attraction owners in the audience out there? Anybody?
They're all down in their haunts, actually.
They're in their haunts.
Yeah, they're working.
These folks are trying to stay
I was
cool.
just going to throw out a tip that I did in year two. Is I had an assistant, and we tried to hire full-time all year. And so in January and February, she would look up every registered charity in New England and write to them and say, this is Spooky World. We had our first Spooktacular year. Now we're on year 2. Would you like free tickets for your charity? In your own handwriting, not typed, please indicate how you can use these tickets, why you'd be worthy of these tickets. And so here we now, by the end of the summer, I got a stack of requests, handwritten letters from all of these charities. And I reached out to Pepsi. I reached out to Lappin's Auto Parts at the time. Party City was around at that point. Various, sponsors. And if they didn't want to buy a sponsorship, they would buy a charity package and would give them the sponsorship for free. So they would pick out letters that are in their market area, and it was great because, they would buy it at a great discount. It would fill up Spooky World in its opening weekend, which was always the quieter weekend. But all of a sudden, we hit the ground running every year, and, first weekend gets to be sold out, and then the rest follows on its own. But that was one of the tips that we followed during the whole run of Spooky World.
When it finally comes out, that rich little goes, Oh yeah, one time they had me call Tiny Tim and pretend to be Johnny Carson. and tell him that he can marry Miss Vicky. And by the way, as I'm saying it out loud, I'm starting to think if anybody would be up to something like that.
Yeah, he'd have done it.
David Bertolino would have done it. Okay, so the documentary is filled with a lot of interesting stories, and of course, we want people to see the documentary. I'd like to know, Quinn and Danny, how did David come to you, or did you come to David?
Well, I'll start and I'll hand it off to Danny. So David and I lived next door to each other, and I used to hang out with David, and he would tell me about Spooky World, and I was making films and little projects, and I said, you know, your life would make a great documentary, because he was in LA doing a play about something completely unrelated. Let's just leave it at that.
Well, say what it was. He was doing a play
I own the rights to Deep Throat.
He was doing a play called The Deep Throat Sex Scandal, about the entire Deep Throat phenomenon, long before any of the movies came out. But anyway, so I said, David, we got to do a documentary about you. And then finally it was like, we got to do a documentary about Spooky World. So we did. In 2019, we flew to New England, where we met our illustrious producer, Anthony Landry, over there. Woo! And, well, I'll just let Anthony talk a little bit about that first meeting. We went to interview you. Anthony started out as a super fan of Spooky World, because he attended as a child. Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I feel really good today because Eddie Munson is alive. Eddie Munson is right there, folks. It's fantastic. Midsummer Scream, you're amazing. Everybody, thank you for coming. So, I was you. I was you, going to haunted attractions, looking to see something new that I hadn't seen yet in the horror genre. And back in the early 90s, David supplied something to our area that we didn't have. None of this came to New England. So all of a sudden, this drops out of the sky about 25, 30 miles outside of Boston. And you know, you go downstairs to that haunted attractions room and you see the fog coming in, you see this lighting. It's absolutely incredible what they made. But imagine if Mother Nature already made that for you and you didn't have to worry about anything. What David picked out was a location right off of the Assabet River. So when you came off of the highway at that time of year, you'd see this fog everywhere. And you'd be like, are they pumping this in? And then you get there and you realize it's just New England. And if anybody's been to New England, you know in the fall, it's the most special place on the planet. So when I was a kid, I had never heard anything like this before. He got in touch with local media. He came up with an incredible marketing plan. I have my Walkman. Who remembers what a Walkman is? Woo! Okay, so I'm on the school bus, don't even have a license, and I hear this jingle come out, which you'll see in the movie. It's America's horror theme park, Spooky World. And it was like I was in a Clockwork Orange with my eye open, just hearing it and hearing it and hearing it. I got a ride from my uncle to go there, and what David brought was NBC. What David brought was USA Up All Night. David figured out a way to make this small farm town. Let me ask you this. If you saw a dramatic series where this farm town of old New England all of a sudden has this theme park drop smack in the middle of it, has Tiny Tim getting married, Jay Leno and The Tonight Show show up, would you watch that?
Yes.
Yeah, so would I. David brought that to New England. We had nothing like that before. I got to meet Kane Hodder. Nobody at that time, aside of Fangoria and their conventions, were doing autographs with celebrities.
Nobody.
We had access to them. So we met them, and do you folks know the name Adam Green?
Yes.
Hatchet?
Hatchet.
Oh yeah.
Victor Crowley? You're gonna see Adam Green in this film at the beginning talk about how he got to meet Kane Hodder as a kid, and now he's directing him as an adult. That's the power that Spooky
He
World
met Kane Hodder at Spooky World.
He did.
Became a horror director on his own right, yeah. And to see all these stories in the film.
And I think this is why, I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add that, you know, I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to have somebody do this documentary following me around for 2 years. But I'll tell you what convinced me. is one night I'm watching Seth Meyers, and he has John Krasinski. Do you guys know John Krasinski, Quiet Place? And Seth says, okay, fellow New Englander, do you have any fond memories of Halloween, where you grew up in Newton, Massachusetts? And he says, yeah, Seth, I do. One of my fondest memories as a kid was going to Spooky World theme park in Boston every year. And it's like, oh my God, in national TV, I call up Quinn the next day, I said, I'm in, go do your movie. And the rest is here we are.
And I think it's a subject that appeals to people all around the country, or even the world for that matter, not just in the Massachusetts area, because Spooky World epitomizes a brand and aesthetic of Halloween that for a long time was very absent. You know, thanks to conventions like Midsummer Scream and, you know, Austin's artwork we see here, we have, it's beautiful, yeah, we have this traditional Halloween vibe, you know, alive in Long Beach, but for a long time, in the 2010s, I'm sure you guys will remember when Halloween and horror went very grungy, very gray, very metallic. And there's nothing wrong with that, to each their own, but Spooky World was orange, black, purple, green. It was those Halloween colors that, you know, were the colors and decorations you grew up with in the 90s, right? Who had like purple and green decorations growing up? Come on, you know you did. Yeah. So Spooky World epitomizes this classic Halloween, sort of frozen in time. And in my opinion, who wouldn't want to go back and experience that perfect era of Halloween entertainment?
And there's, aside from all these great things that you'll see in the documentary, I want to talk a little about some of the other, marrying a guy who was already married to a woman who was already married to her married. That's pretty good. You once buried a DJ alive? So tell us some of...
And he actually, this DJ was, you know, one of the top people on Boston radio, and we dug him into put him in a coffin, put him 6 feet under in the hayride line, and he broadcast his show every morning from the earth below. And various people would interview him and chat with him, and then at night, because we had a camera, we had a spooky screen, and you'd see his image in there talking, and you know, it was crazy. We did a lot of stunts, and not just once in a while. There was a stunt every day. We married somebody almost every day at Spooky World. We had a $99 wedding. If you wanted to get married, we would get you the Justice of the Peace, would get you the cake, would get you the best man could be Tiny Tim, Bobby Boris Pickett, or whoever other celebrity was there. We would lose money on the $99, but the wedding party would have all of their guests buy 100, 200 tickets at the front gate to go see the wedding. So every night we're adding hundreds of tickets to do. There was one night we had 4 weddings. It was phenomenal. Like 1 an hour, we're knocking them out in the hayride, and people love watching it. They were in line to go on the hayride.
I would be curious to see how many of those marriages lasted. Because I got married in a church twice, and it didn't work out.
And 2 of them are here tonight, if they'd like to stand up.
Miss Vicky and Miss... I swooped in. Yes.
I also wanted to say what makes this documentary so great is the conflict and the drama, and how much David had to endure as this outsider that comes in. And you'll see in the documentary what he has to go through with the local townspeople, the city council, politicians, PETA.
Tell us about PETA. Tell us about PETA, David.
I had one of the most photographed spots in one of the 6 haunted houses we had was the Mouse Girl. And you walk through in a room, and in a crystal casket, little Ruthie was in a little baby outfit, and she had 200 feeder mice crawling all over her. In fact, to intensify things, if she knew there was cameras there, media, she would get her Jiffy peanut butter and smear it on her face, her neck, her legs, so they'd be licking it all off of her. I know, it's weird.
It's in the film.
And so in one of the other rooms, the hallway, where we had 1-inch plexiglass floor, I had these huge rats. And they would walk by the light areas and it would freak you out when you're walking in the darkness and seeing these rats underneath your feet. And so PETA, you know, is angry with us.